viability, continued viability of North Reading. And I think we all need to come together as a community. We have all the folks in this room that are up in Martin's Pond that deal on a daily basis with the nightmarish problems with the septic system. We have to look to take care of them. We have to look to take care of and increase our commercial tax base. This is what's going to give us that opportunity. As I've heard Mr. Hanlon say over and over again, North Reading is not looked upon as a mature community. Why are we not looked upon as a mature community? Because we don't have town sewer. Go a couple miles down the road, as Mr. Hanlon pointed out, down to the Jordan's Furniture location, Home Depot down in Reading, and the influx of commercial properties that have come in over the last 3 to 5 years down there has been amazing. That's what can come in to North Reading. That's how we increase our commercial tax base, if we have town sewer in this town. No, it won't happen tomorrow. No, it won't happen next year. But we have to have a vision in this town that takes care of all the townspeople and also lessens the property taxes that are paid by each one of you. Increase the commercial tax base, increase the commercial tax revenue, and this town will have long-term viability. Without this project, and no, maybe it's not the right time economically, but I don't know when it will be. If we don't act now, this cost is only going to increase. There's been missed opportunities in this community for a number of years with this particular project. I say, bite the bullet, bite it now, for the greater good of this community. That's my view on this particular project, and we all gain, we all benefit.
Good evening. I'm Janine Margent, 11 Hillside Road, the Martins Pond area. One of the things that concerns me most here is we hear a lot about, and obviously I support the infrastructure and developmental growth of North Reading as well, but it looks to me like this 80-20 split. We have a town where everybody's going to benefit if we grow developmentally and economically. Someone with a brand new septic system who's invested a lot of money in it, who potentially is going to have this run by her house. I will be in a position of paying $1,500 a year if the costs are fixed, assuming they won't be, and potentially more in assessed property value and taxes as well. I have a hard time buying the 80-20 split as a betterment for myself, and I think that the whole town is sharing this betterment. What can you tell me about why you came up with that number?
Fair is fair.
Yeah, and I guess we wrestled with this for a long time. It was probably over a year period. The numbers eventually evolved to that 80-20 split. Again, the cost of a replacement system, one of the primary driving factors in this was the cost of the replacement system is approximately equal to, for a standard system, that betterment cost. So I understand you may have a new system in, your next door neighbor may not. What is the cost to them of replacing their system? Why should someone, and this is not my question, but this is a question we've heard from other people. I live on Marblehead Street. I'm not getting town sewer. My system's going to fail at some point too, and I'm going to bear 100% of the cost of my system, plus I'm going to bear the tax burden of paying a portion of your system.
Can I answer your question? If you have children that attend that school, if you have people who utilize the municipal downtown offices that are going to be served by this sewer system, if you're going to appreciate increased property values because of
You get all those benefits too, and you get rid of your house.
and increase taxes.
If we're going to have a meaningful conversation, it has to be through the chair, one person at a time, okay? So you have...
Get a new microphone, you can't even hear the damn thing.
Well, that microphone is for the...
It's not for
video
you guys,
and
it's
TV.
for...
It's got nothing to do with here. There's no PA system in here right now. So those that are speaking into the microphone are for the purpose of the home viewers, and please speak up loud if you want the rest of the audience to hear. Okay. So there was a gentleman here.
Well, she pretty much said the same thing, and you really don't want to hear me. You guys, I mean, you keep talking about the betterment, 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 and then you contradict yourself and say, we're the only ones that are gonna make out with this. But yet you're gonna make out if a new commercial comes in, you're gonna make out, you're gonna make out, you're gonna make out, all of you. Any of you paying 20 grand for this? Actually, 30 grand over 20 years. That's my only question. Thank you.
Michael, you're all set, okay? Next, raise your hand, woman here. I'll get you next.
Tricia St. Germain, 7 Surrey Lane. First, a small question. I live near Concord Street on Surrey Lane. Is Surrey Lane in the betterment project?
It does not look like it is, no.
I think one of the things that is a problem for people is that every time a project comes up, it's isolated. You're talking about this as a $40 million project, but in the same newspaper article, a newspaper issue last week, the school department's talking about $90 million for the high school and the junior high school. And every time all these overrides come up, it's going to be only $300 for this and only $150 for that, and yet they keep accumulating and accumulating. People just can't keep paying money out like this. If people were even to utilize that 4% loan, which is a great deal for anybody who would have to go to a bank and pay something much larger, what happens to the town's debt service if everybody were to take you up on that 4% loan? And we had to borrow, what, $40 million?
The bulk of the borrowing is coming through the state revolving fund process, where they're actually fronting the town the money, the town pays it back over time.
But you have a capacity to borrow a certain amount of money, and the town would be out $40 million if we were to finance everybody.
Doesn't work.
The financing on this is a little tricky. When you finance a sewer project, there's some key differences. The main difference, Mark mentioned earlier, that if you had done this project, 20, 25, 30 years ago, you would have got federal grant money and state grant money that would have leveraged the project, so you'd pay about 10 cents on the dollar. Many years ago, the amount of money that the government could contribute to these types of projects went away. And because that went away, there was still recognition that many projects, many needy communities had not implemented solutions to their wastewater problems. So what the state did instead is the federal government and the state government got together and they established what they call the State Revolving Loan Program. It's the SR, we sometimes refer to it as the SRF, the State Revolving Fund. Basically what these are is low-interest loan programs that are set up specifically for projects like this, that the state provides as a method to the town of financing the projects. There's no grant, but what it does give you is an extremely heavily leveraged borrowing, and it keeps money coming back in. When the town borrows money for this project, we've estimated about 90% of the project costs, about 90% of the 40 million, will be eligible for SRF financing. Now, will that program always be there? No guarantees. But the last 2 years, every single community in the state that had projects, many of them not even as need-driven as your project here in North Reading, every project was funded the last couple of years by the state. So right now, what we expect is that 90% of the project costs will be financed through a 2% interest loan given by the state. What that means is twofold. One is the town will get a great interest rate on their own, and therefore can offer you a great interest rate if you have to borrow the betterment. That's why that 4% is there. It's actually dictated by state law. It's that the state betterment law says you can charge a certain amount. The second part of the equation is an important one too. The reason that the betterment money is so important is because it makes the financing of this project different from the financing of a school project or any other municipal project. With a school project or other municipal project, every single bit of those costs you don't get a grant for, has to go on the tax rate. In this case, where you're going to put, in this current time, the recommendation is 80% of the costs, you're being recommended to put 80% of the costs on betterments. There's a dedicated revenue stream that comes back from those betterments. Because there's a dedicated revenue stream, it gives you two advantages. One, the impact on your tax rate's lower. Two, when anyone in the future looks at you to try to bond another project, they will recognize that revenue stream. Your bank and your bond counsel will recognize that revenue stream that comes from the betterments. and they'll be able to factor that in. So in essence, even though you are going to borrow $40 million, you're actually only going to have to be rated as if you're going to borrow that, whatever the amount is for the tax portion, in this case, 20%. So there's quite a bit of difference between the way the projects are financed if it's a local project for a building versus a sewer project.
So you're saying that $40 million is not impacting the town's borrowing capacity?
That's incorrect. It absolutely is. Every time you borrow, it impacts your borrowing capacity. What I'm saying is, if you borrow $40 million for a town building and $40 million for a sewer system, the way we've proposed it through the SRF program, it has a very different impact. The sewer program will have a much lower impact on the town's borrowing capacity than a general town tax-funded project.
And that's because a portion of it, depending on the split, is being borne by
And it's
better-
not hitting
better-
the town's,
What?
it's not affecting the town's borrowing capacity?
Well, it is affecting the town's
Of
consequence.
course it is, I know that.
But
So
not
if
to the
everybody
same-
takes us up on the 4% loan, we're borrowing $40 million.
Correct.
No, Bob, can I clarify that? Bob, can I clarify? That last little bit was not exactly correct.
I'm sorry, I thought you said we would be borrowing $40 million, right? And it would have an impact on our borrowing capacity.
That's correct, but I think what you said was if people take the 4% financing. The allocation of what you select to apportion your betterment is independent of what the impact is this project's going to have. The way the financing works is the betterment is linked to your property. Once you're bettered, you're bettered. When you get a loan, it's not a loan per se on this. It's not a 4% loan. It's an apportionment as if you would have had a tax bill apportioned. The reason that the interest is charged is to do the very thing you're saying it does. It's the opposite. You get charged 4% interest to protect the town from taking a liability when you do finance the betterment, when you do take the betterment apportionment. It actually works to the town's. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but it actually works to the town's advantage to have interest charged to you on the betterment. There are communities that fund these very types of projects, and they basically say, I'm going to offer it out at the flat rate of what I've got. They got to do some special legislation, but they do it. Or I'm going to offer it at 0% to people. Those systems create a liability to the town. The system you've got in front of you is designed to meet the state laws. The way the state laws work is if you apportion your betterment, it does not cause any harm to the town's financial position. That issue, the apportionment, is independent of the town's financial position.
Okay, let's give people that haven't been up yet. In here.
Hi, Lita Jenny from Martin's Pond Committee. I was wondering if the interest portion of the betterment is something you can put on your income taxes as a deduction. And I am in support of this, but I do have a little bit of problem with thinking that I've got 10 more years to pay for my septic system that we built 10 years ago, and I'll be paying for this, so I'm not sure about the split, if I agree with it, but I'm trying to understand it more.
I wish I could give you a better answer than this, but I'm going to give you the real answer. And the real answer is, that's a question for your tax accountant. I will tell you quite honestly that I know of people who have deducted their betterment, their annual betterment charge on their income taxes. I will also tell you that my understanding from the official position of the Department of Revenue is that it does not qualify as your normal tax bill would. But you really have to ask those, the laws are constantly changing. The Department of Revenue every year issues new findings of how they want to handle those things. So it's a really great question to put to your tax attorney.
Okay, Mike, back.
Yeah, I just wanted to approach this question of the split, 50/50 versus the 20 or whatever. The thing is that the benefit to the town, the benefit that people get if we have increased commercial business in town, the benefit that people get because their children go to the high school or the middle school and they happen to be on sewer, that's why there is a split. In other words, if we were saying as a committee that there's no benefit to anybody that's not getting sewer coming directly down their street, then